All right, everybody. We'll get started with today's session. Thanks so much for joining early in World Water Week on a Sunday afternoon. Today, we're going to be speaking about rural water innovation from concept to scale up. And we have a couple of logistical items to cover. Yes, so maybe to the next. So quick welcome and introduction, followed by a panel reflecting on past innovations. Spirit of Innovation panel will be then breaking out into groups for more one-on-one engagement and following with a panel that's looking forward on future perspectives. I think we also have an interactive activity for both audience members here in the room, as well as those that are participating online. So please join this activity by scanning the code and filling out the little survey that we've posted here. We won't be presenting the results immediately, but I think it's going to be great feedback for us as we think about how to disseminate information from this session going forward. So while you're all doing that, I'll start with a quick introduction to this session. We've got a great lineup. We'll be engaging with innovators from 10 different organizations that study and implement rural water services. The topics that we'll discuss span technical, programmatic, and financial innovations, and these are summarized in 2 recent publications by the Real Water Program. These are good references. For more information, if you're if you have questions following the panel and just want to dig more into more detail, we can help you access these 2 reports. So what is Real Water? Real Water stands for Rural Evidence and Learning for Water. This is an action research program that is supported by a cooperative agreement between USAID and the Acquia Institute, or Acquia, which is a nonprofit research and consulting group dedicated to international water and sanitation development. My name is Ranjiv Kush. I'm the project director for Real Water. I lead the program together with my colleague, Jeff Albert, who'll be moderating some of the upcoming sessions. Our colleague, Aline Saravia, is helping to coordinate all of the logistical items on this session. And we have our colleague, Karen Setti from the Acquia Institute, who's managing the online piece of this. So, I've been working now on international water and sanitation development for about 20 years. And I think other old timers in the sector will agree with me that our work is often this fight for a balance between progress and setbacks. I'm curious, how many of you have had those periods when you were frankly discouraged by slow progress? Well, I'm really happy to say that I think I can provide, I know I can provide some positive energy to this room by introducing Nancy Eslick, who has kindly agreed to launch the session. Nancy is a senior deputy assistant to the administrator at USAID. And she was recently appointed as USAID's Global Water Coordinator. Now, from my perspective, Nancy's appointment as the USAID Global Water Coordinator is an important positive development for our sector. Now, why do I say that? Because I believe it further demonstrates USAID's commitment to investing in water and sanitation development. Now, why does Nancy's appointment tell us that USAID means business? Because she's clearly a star. She's been in the senior foreign services now for over 20 years. Most recently, she was deputy assistant administrator working on Ukraine. Previously, she was USAID mission director in Cambodia and the acting mission director in Jordan, which many of you will know is one of USAID's largest development programs. She has also served in Burma, Pakistan, Uganda, and Afghanistan. that's quite a CV. Nancy clearly knows how to get stuff done. But I got to say, I have a couple of items in that CV that really stood out to me. First, she began her career in international development as a Peace Corps volunteer in Uganda, which I think many of us can relate to. She has master's degrees in public affairs and environmental sciences with a focus on water resources from Indiana University at Bloomington. So, Nancy, I could go on. You asked me to keep it short, so I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Ranjiv. I did ask him to keep it short, and he didn't, but I appreciate it. It is such an honor to be here. This is my first World Water Week, and I'm so excited to join all of you in the industry to learn from and share from our peers. It is incredibly important in terms of a learning agenda. And I just really thank you for coming to this session and participating and learning a little bit about this program, because it's an important discussion about innovations in rural water service delivery. While rapid urbanization and lack of essential services and infrastructure continue to dominate the headlines, the United States Agency for International Development remains a reliable partner in supporting services for people living in rural and peri-urban areas across the globe. Currently, 1.2 billion people do not have access to safe drinking water in rural areas. Yet we know that to achieve universal access to water services means that leaves no one behind, including those who have not migrated to megacities or live in secondary urban cities. Through the U.S. Global Water Strategy, USAID is doubling down on our efforts to increase water and sanitation to access 22 million people to safe water and 22 million people with access to sanitation, half of whom have never had access before. USAID, we're taking a catalytic approach to accelerating global progress on water and sanitation, including through a focus on action research. And that's what we're here today to discuss. Through our multi-million-dollar Global Water Strategy Action Research Initiative, USAID intends to make numerous investments to support evidence-based policy and programming decisions. Today's session is going to highlight just one of them. As indicated by the title, this research is not theoretical in nature. Instead, it's embedded in on-the-ground action that can be taken to accelerate all of us reaching these goals. Through the Global Water Strategy Action Research Initiative, USAID and our partners are conducting research on 7 focal areas. The research will surface new sector evidence that can be applied to development and humanitarian programming and to policymaking. Improving the performance of water service providers is just one focal area. We will also be investigating how best to support water resource management and watershed rehabilitation, mobilizing public and private finance, and also strengthen institutional capacity, among other important topics. While we encourage partner governments, other donors, and civil society to use our findings, I also commit that USAID will use our findings across our entire program cycle, from initial strategy development to activity design, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of the activities that we fund, which is a normal part of every program that we run. During this session today, we will discuss how technical and financial innovations have shaped and offer promise for achieving a water secure world, which is especially critical given the climate crisis we all face. I look forward to hearing about the latest in rural water innovation from all of you, and to hear your thoughts on how USAID can continue knowledge creation, sharing, and innovation that drives progress in water security, sanitation, and hygiene. Everyone in this room has a role to play in this. And I hope that you can see yourselves not only in this evidence-based results and action agenda, but in the work that you do every day to achieve these ambitious targets. So thank you so much for having me. And I'm going to say now over to the experts. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much again, Nancy. So we're going to be covering a lot of different technical and financial innovations during this session through our discussions with the two different panels that I noted. But we thought a lot about what we could give as an example for innovation that has already had a big impact on rural water development. And it was hard not to eventually go to hand pumps. Now, hand pumps have been with us for so long that we may not really recognize both the value that they have brought to rural water service delivery, as well as the lessons that hand pumps, both in their scale up and in the challenges that they have faced, bring to new innovations. So to remind us of what we can learn from hand pumps, we have very fortunately Sean Fury, the director of the Rural Water Supply Network Secretariat, to give us a 10-minute primer. Sean?
Hello, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you, Ranju, for the introduction. So let's just check that that's working. So in the next 10 minutes, I was asked to give a presentation on hand pump history in 10 minutes. I was like, sorry, did I hear you? Did you say 10 minutes? 10 hours, surely? No, okay. So I will try and be concise. So what we're going to start with is the fact that, as Ranjiv points out, this is in some ways a very ancient technology. Just about every civilization that we know of has invented some kind of water lifting device. So why is this a good story? Well, first of all, for a long time, for many centuries, the default in many societies was a hand pump made out of cast iron, either some form of suction or piston pump. And that really changed in the 1970s. And that's the story I want to tell briefly today. And then that carried on into the 1980s with the World Bank hand pump project that led to the publication that you can see on the screen, which is Community Water Supply, the hand pump option, which remains a central text, as it were, for rural water supply. Whenever I get someone call me up and say, oh, I've invented a new type of hand pump, I point them to this document and say, read that and come back to me if you've invented something new. I never hear from them again. Except for Design Outreach, an honorable mention to Design Outreach, who really did come up with something new. And then in parallel to that, there was the AfriDev that was developed at the same time to be a more easily repairable pump. And then more recently, in the last couple of decades, it led to standardization led by our network. So the story of the India Mark II goes back to 1967, when there was a drought in India, in Bihar, and the government of India and the state government invited UNICEF in, or asked for UNICEF's help. So UNICEF came in and they drilled thousands of boreholes across the state to get people access to water. But a couple of years later, when they went back to see the results of that, they found that shockingly, about 3/4 of the cast iron hand pumps that they'd installed were broken and just not working. So they started looking around for solutions. And at that time, there was a gentleman called Oscar Carlson, who'd been working in India in a local workshop with a local NGO, who'd been working on developing an all-steel hand pump. And UNICEF got wind of this and collaborated with him and his team, and they bought several thousand of these and they tested them. And they convened a collaboration between the government of India, a manufacturing company called Richard and Cruddas, an NGO, and together they refined the design. They went to Tamil Nadu, they tested this refined design with a few more thousand pumps. And then that was successful enough that they then the government of India convened a national workshop in the late 70s to develop a standard, and that was then taken up by the Bureau of Indian Standards and has been revised ever since. Initially just through the 80s, but even today, Bureau of Indian Standards are updating that. Also in the 80s, a variant was created, the India Mark III, but to make it more easily repairable at the village level, so you didn't need specialist tools or training. And then in the legacy of the hand pump project of the 1980s was the hand pump technology network, which was effectively kind of a World Bank UNICEF technical working group on the technology. And that's what evolved in the mid-2000s into the rural water supply network that we have today with over 15,000 members. And really the last step, modern step, is in 2007, the most recent revision of the international public domain standards was published. So what can we learn from this? I mean, there are three kind of stages. There's the development, there's the scaling up, and then there's the long-term support, but also the end of life of technology to consider. So where these things are really, think about these when we're talking about other examples. So first of all, I think in the development, a key part of this was the strength of the collaboration of a diverse partnership between an international organization, government, private sector, working together. They knew their roles, they collaborated, and with well-defined objectives. And in the scaling up, that was really supported by government adoption of the standards, inclusion in programs, both government programs and donor programs, not just in India, but elsewhere. So we saw the likes of the UK, the CEDA, DANIDA, others incorporating this pump in their programming. And strong private sector capacity in India to meet that demand. And having an open standard allowed many entrants to the market while getting the interchangeability of parts. Now, there's been a long debate, particularly in the HTN years, about whether a public domain standard or a proprietary standard is the best way to go. Long term, though, I would say that the issues around supply chains are absolutely critical to the sustainability of any technology, and how keeping that affordable. The continuous commitment to quality control is absolutely essential. And that the after-sales service and the whole management piece around it is critical to ensure that there are the right support and incentives to deliver a quality product. And that when eventually a better technology comes along, that there is thoughtful means of transitioning. So if we're transitioning from a hand pump to household water connections, what about those that are going to be left behind, such as nomadic and pastoralists that don't have houses that you can have a household pipe water connection to? So that's something to consider. But in reality, what we see is that hand pumps are still relevant today. We estimate in a recent study that over 200 million people in sub-Saharan Africa alone, and there are many millions more across Asia and elsewhere, are still reliant on the technology. And that's around 700,000 hand pumps estimated. We don't have firm figures. So finally, kind of looking ahead, we did a survey of our members about what they saw as the future. And clearly you can see from this graph that they saw that solar pumping is the technology of the future in terms of pumping. But I think I also want to draw your attention to the fact that over half the respondents said that in 5 years' time, they still see hand pumps as an important technology. So there is an important legacy effect of implication of caring for this, because there are issues that have emerged, such as corrosion, such as lead, that need to be tackled because they are a public health and sustainability issue. So that's it. If you want to, that's a very quick overview of a very deep story. We have a lot of lots of great documentation on our website, from rope pumps in Nicaragua to various other great stories and guidance and all the rest of it on our website. But I'll leave it there. So thank you very much.
As Sean was saying, I'm guessing we could spend the rest of the session talking about issues related to hand pumps. But in the interest of covering things coming up in the future, things that we're excited about right now, we thought it best to move quickly into our next session, which is going to be a panel discussion moderated by Jeff Albert.
See, we're quite ambitious here, for the next roughly 30 minutes, we're going to be introducing some specific innovations. Yeah, come on up, Keith. And these we'll spend about 5 minutes on each of these innovations, with a little bit of back and forth between myself and the panelists. And after which there'll be breakout sessions with each of them. So to dig really deep, you'll have about another 20 minutes following the panel to talk to folks directly. So that's where we're going with this. So we've got basically two categories of innovation we're going to be talking about: technology and product-oriented innovations, and then innovations that are more focused on the financial side. And so that's how we'll cluster them. And we're going to start with the technology side. So I'm going to start with Chris Cope from Water Mission. This was great. Sean and I did not coordinate beforehand, but his mention of solar pumping as something that the sector was really emphasizing as an important future innovation is something that we're going to invite Chris to talk about. So, the other thing about process, every panelist is going to basically give the elevator pitch of their innovation for about a minute, and then we'll follow on with some discussions. So, Chris, take it away.
Thanks, Jeff. Well, according to Sean's presentation, I don't really have to convince you that solar pumping is part of the future. Yeah, so I'm part of Water Mission, and we do primarily solar water pumping. We also are in sanitation and hygiene, but solar pumping is, everyone in this room, I would assume, agrees that we want people to have safe water, right? Does anyone disagree? Okay, let's just move on. All right, so we want people to have safe water, but to get people safe water, yes, the water needs to be safe, but it also needs to be available. It has to be convenient for people. This is the thing that people value the most from safe water systems. And then it also needs to be reliable. It needs to be reliable, available on a consistent basis, preferably available all the time. And then it also has to be affordable. It has to be something that they can afford in their communities with their current salaries. And so to make it safe, inline treatment is almost always going to be the answer for scalability. To reach a large amount of people in a rural community, you're going to need inline treatment. To make it available, you're probably going to have to put that in a water tower. These distribution systems are very broad, and if we want it available for people where it's convenient, we have to pump it high. Reliable. Right now, the alternative to solar pumping in many communities is diesel generators. And then, although they are polluting to the environment, they are also very subject to volatile oil prices. And their supply chain networks that aren't always providing the proper amount of diesel to these communities. So reliability is a question just from the type of fuel or energy used. And then the last type is affordability. And going back to oil again, this is very expensive at times, but there's a limitless supply of energy that's available in most parts of the world, and that is solar irradiation. So to my knowledge, I'm not going to say it works everywhere, but for most communities, solar pumping is the answer for what meets all of these criteria to get people safe water. Thank you.
Nice, Chris. Thanks. Yeah, there's some advocates here. Sorry, I had see check 1 2. I was just going to not everyone needs to stand up. You're welcome to come and stand and present. But Chris, I wanted to ask you, clearly solar pumping makes enormous sense with respect to reducing climate impacts and also in terms of elevating resilience, right? And other cost implications that you described. So the question I have for you is, you have mentioned an innovation chasm, where it's like, it's clearly an innovation that makes sense. What's limiting the spread? What are the main obstacles right now? That contribute to that?
It's okay if I stand.
Whatever, as you prefer.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. So I'll tell a little story. So Sadiq here in the back, we reunited after more than a year. And so Sadiq and I met while we were conducting a solar powered water system training course in his country of Nigeria. And so Sadiq is with Green Habitat, and we kind of caught up on the stories. During this workshop, we taught what is proper solar powered water system design? How do all the components work together? It's kind of like an organism. And Sadiq they're doing 32 or 34 solar powered water systems in northwestern Nigeria. And so this is fantastic. It's great. However, he, as an engineer, is having to go in and redo some of the designs that the consultant is providing. Hopefully I'm not going to get you in trouble by saying this. Okay. So I'm starting with a success story, but it'll illustrate the problem. The workshop worked because now Sadiq has the knowledge to go in and check the designs. The problem is that the consultant who is supposed to know about how to do the designs doesn't know how to do it. And I think we've heard a lot about capacity gaps, technical capacity gaps. That is one of the biggest issues. That is what is preventing solar pumping from moving into the early majority. So we're in the early stages, we're the early adopters. So that's one thing. However, tied to that is when you don't do proper designs, whether it's part of the initial design or designing the operations and maintenance long-term, working with the communities, is failures. Failures is one of the biggest obstacles to it crossing the chasm. People are scared of solar pumping and they're not doing it, or they're doing it very poorly because they don't understand the basics, the very basics of how it's going. So, so capacity gaps lead to failures. It leads to scared people, and it fails to scale. So that's what's needed. We in this room have to have a basic understanding of how solar pumping works so that we can keep our counterparts accountable and we can strive towards successful solar pumping initiatives. So, so I don't know if you like to read, but I enjoy quotes quite a bit. Upton Sinclair once wrote that it is difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on him not understanding it. I'll read it again if maybe English isn't your first language. It is difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on him not understanding it. We have to incentivize according to quality, what we want. Unfortunately, we're incentivizing poor behavior. We are incentivizing poor design, and we have to know about it so that we can ask the hard questions or even the easy questions. So, so those are two things. We need to build capacity, and we need donors. We need the people who are holding the purse strings to require quality. And then the third one, I'll use another quote, although I can't name who said this. Bridges aren't built because people are swimming across rivers. Bridges aren't built because people are swimming across rivers. We have a severe supply chain issue. We do not have the products in place so that when a system goes down, we can replace components within 24 hours. I've seen this done in one country, and that was in the Gambia. I'm sure it exists elsewhere. Okay, I'm taking too long.
No.
All right. Yeah.
Time management is my responsibility.
Okay. Yeah.
So thanks, Chris.
Yeah, thank you.
That's great. You're done. I'm changing the order up a little bit just because of Chris's remarks, specifically this notion of this ecosystem and the requirement of an ecosystem in order for an innovation to be successful and to scale. Because this is based on discussions with Keith Wright of the Millennium Water Alliance. Why don't you do your quick elevator pitch on sensors, remote sensors of hand pumps, and then we'll talk about ecosystems to follow up. Check. There we go.
Technology. Failed that one. So I'm Keith Wright, Executive Director of the Millennium Water Alliance, here talking about one of the products of our partners, Veridi, which is an offshoot of UC Boulder's Mortensen Center for Global Engineering. And yeah, my elevator pitch is just how technology alone doesn't do a whole lot. It has to sit within an ecosystem of incentives, behaviors. What do we do with the data that's generated? So we develop these sensors under a USAID-funded RAPID program in Kenya. The sensors are now across Ethiopia, Somalia, Kenya. Sensors are working pretty well. Some of our expectations about how that data would be used for decision-making and action haven't been quite what we were hoping for. And these are mostly in solar-based gravity distributed systems, but continuing now to address what we've learned from those initial gaps. So the sensors are working, but how's that data being used to incentivize operations and maintenance, groundwater predictions, et cetera? So we can talk more about that.
Yeah, so I guess there, like what's these, I'm sorry. So clearly sensors on their face, like solar pumping, they're obvious innovations to allow us to understand what's happening in remote locations. And of course, the design and the engineering to make them perform well is another question we're not going to be touching on here. But in order to have the question that we hear from USAID is how does the deployment of sensors result in changes in performance? That's ultimately what we're going for. So like, I'd love to hear more about your experiences.
Yeah, I mean, there's actually a detailed evaluation report funded by USAID from a few years ago on the Kenya RAPID program. So if you're looking for a deep dive, some documentation, it's in there. What we found was sensors are working pretty well, getting lots of good data on is the system functioning, flow rates, which helps you then make conclusions about groundwater use, et cetera. So that's great. That's step one. But the idea, the theory was that receiving data, so, system number 121 is down, that would get in the right hands and incentivize deployment of an operations and maintenance team, which wasn't working as much as we had hoped because, of course, it's so easy to focus on the technology, but what are the behaviors it needs to drive? Some of the challenges were resources. So you see that a system's not functioning or not functioning as intended. How and when is the right person on the picky with the right tool deployed across, this is northern Kenya where distances are quite big, and that's been less than hoped for. So as we're moving forward, it's really looking at those incentives. So we're actually using carbon credit revenue as revenue flow into those water systems, which the sensors enable. So I've gotten the gold standard to approve that data as a verifier, which then can generate revenue. So if the right guy on the right picky isn't deployed, the system's not generating revenue. So looking at those incentives. So technology is a big first step, make sure they work, but then looking at that ecosystem of relationships with government, NGO partners, technical providers, in making sure that the business network is frankly incentivizing action based on that data.
Thanks. You could pass the mic to Megan. So we're next. This is the last of our tech innovations in our round robin here. And again, remember at the breakout sessions, you'll have a chance to talk to each of the panelists and pepper them with your own questions. We're pleased to have Megan Angulo from Evidence Action. They work on chlorination, and many of you have to be familiar with their work. It's been quite remarkable, gotten a lot of attention. Megan, can you walk us through dispensers for safe water?
Sure. Can you hear me? There we go. Thanks, Jeff. So I am Megan Angulo, and I work on the Safe Water team at Evidence Action. So for those who are unfamiliar with Evidence Action, we are an NGO that scales low-cost health interventions to improve the well-being of hundreds of millions of people worldwide. So the Dispensers for Safe Water program, the innovation that I'm actually here to talk about. So for less than $1.50 per person per day, DSW provides over 10 million people across rural Kenya, Uganda, and Malawi with access to reliable, safe water. So the model is very simple. A user will go to their usual water point, will place their bucket underneath the chlorine dispenser, rotate the valve to dispense the proper dosage of liquid chlorine, and then proceed to fill their bucket with water as they normally would. The chlorine then disinfects that water in the course of their walk home, and by the time they arrive home, that water is safe to drink for up to 3 days. So there was a recent meta-analysis published last year by the Nobel laureate Michael Kramer and his colleagues, showing that you can reduce under 5 all-cause mortality by up to 30% just by treating water. So there's essentially a lot of evidence to say that this may be one of the most cost-effective ways to help save the lives of young children. So we are in the process of scaling this intervention, and I'm very happy to answer any questions that anyone has about it.
So just a moment on this. So recognize these results, the reduction of all-cause mortality among under 5s, it was from a 4-year deployment of this sensor program in Western Kenya, got a ton of attention. And as a result, you at Evidence Action are scaling up this work. If you could just say, I've got 2 questions. So the first one on dispensers is what's the vision for the trajectory of this program? So this is a program it's in Kenya. There are other countries that you're scaling to, yes? Uganda, Malawi. And clearly there's quite a heavy touch in terms of the NGO or the chlorine provider, maintainer, et cetera. What kind of vision is there for, sort of a long-lasting intervention? And then we'll talk about inline chlorination.
Sure, thanks. So at the moment, I think as Jeff referenced, we did recently receive a grant from GiveWell for 7 years to scale up the dispensers program, so now we are operating 52,000 dispensers, reaching 10 million people across those 3 geographies. We are also in the process of exploring new geographies and scoping new places where this type of intervention might be beneficial. So in doing so, we are meeting with a number of different kind of governments, NGOs, et cetera, kind of try to assess the extent to which this intervention would be best suited for that community. We are looking at continuing to implement in our direct implementation model, as well as looking at potential avenues for technical assistance, as well as partnerships with other NGOs that might be working on water access or doing proactive maintenance models on hand pumps, for instance. So we're looking at scaling through a few different means over the course of the next 7 years.
Thanks, Megan. So I got one other question for you about so Evidence Action, they're thinking very big, and that's part of the reason they're on the stage. So in addition to dispensers, they're also working on inline chlorination. Now, again, just pause for a moment, right? The notion of chlorination as an innovation in 2023, it's a little ridiculous on the one hand, right? But no, as Megan's demonstrating to us, it's the manner of deploying chlorination in these very challenging settings that actually requires a ton of innovation. So one thing that we understand you're doing it at Evidence Action is to modify an existing open source design. So there's very much a product tweak. And if you could just talk about why you're doing that, given that there are a number of existing devices, such as water missions, for example, that are already out there.
Sure. So at our core, our ethos is we're looking for cost-effective, evidence-based and interventions that can reach massive scale. So we want to reach as many people as possible with water treatment, given the massive impact and effects that it has. In doing so, we're recognizing that chlorine dispensers are one solution, but there are others out there that may reach other populations. One of those is inline chlorination. So what we've been doing is we essentially have developed using the CTIA, which is open source inline chlorinator, are looking at scaling that to new geographies as well. So we currently have a pilot, we're scaling up. We had a pilot in Kenya, in Uganda and Malawi, and we've also entered a technical assistance partnership with JJM and the Indian government to provide support for scaling inline chlorination technology across 2 states in India as well. So the chlorine dispensers are kind of one intervention in what we're kind of building out to be a suite of options for water treatment across different populations.
That's great. Thanks, Megan. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the Indian context, the JJM is the Jal Jeevan Mission. I think it could be argued the most ambitious rural water supply program ever attempted, and evidence actions front and center there. So thank you, Megan. That's really clear. Okay, so we're now going to switch to the financial side. We'll be talking to Elise Mann from IDE, to Shahzadul Islam from water.org in Bangladesh, and to Peace Musangi about the Water Quality Assurance Fund from Acquia and the Real Water Program. We're going to start with Elise, but just to set this up, the economics of rural water service delivery are such that the full recovery, including the cost of capital, we know that in these rural settings, it basically never happens. So there is this obvious financing gap, and figuring out not only these novel sources of funding, but also novel ways to deploy them is an imperative in our sector, as you all know. So I'd like to start with Elise Mann from IDE. You have the mic. That's great. If you could start by hearing about your deployment of carbon credits in Cambodia. Welcome, Elise.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jeff. Hi, everyone. Elise Mann. I work with IDE Global. For those of you that aren't aware of us or need a reminder, we work with entrepreneurs and businesses around the world to solve complex challenges related to poverty. So we are market-based, which means everything we do needs to be sold and purchased. That means that services and products need to be desirable and affordable. And for what we do, sometimes affordability is going to be a limit. There are always going to be people that cannot afford the products and services that we are trying to promote. So what I want to talk to you about today is a point of use water filter in Cambodia. It's being sold by Hydrologic. It's a social enterprise that has sold over 700,000 water filters over the last 20 years. And we've used carbon credits for the last decade to lower the cost. Now, those carbon credits have been really essential for us to be able to continue innovating so that we're increasing the quality of our environmental work, as well as making sure that customers can continue to afford the locally made product.
And I want to also, I'd just like to make a point here about how important this is that Cambodia is the setting here, because Cambodia is a place where the prevalence of boiling water for drinking is quite high. And so the evidence basis for an actual offset of carbon is much stronger in Cambodia than it would be in settings where boiling is very low. And I think go ahead, please.
I was going to say, I thought that was my follow-up question.
Oh, yeah. Well,
I will reiterate that point, is that it is really important in Cambodia that the prevalence of household water, boiling of water is over 70%. And so that, along with the combined report of our users and the people that have purchased these water filters, is over 80%. So that high usage rate and the high likelihood of boiling across Cambodia is really essential to defending our carbon credits, because I know we could have lots of conversations around the carbon credits and their use around the world, from water to sanitation. And for us too, is within Hydrologic's approach, it's really important to look at our co-benefits as well. So thinking about the health impacts, lower reported amount of smoke, as well as lower amounts of money spent or time spent either on collecting or buying firewood. And those co-benefits also increase the quality of our carbon credits. So if you're looking for some carbon credits that are backed by a lot of evidence, please check out ours at Hydrologic.
Elise, I want to applaud you for grabbing the mic back, because as you should have. I have another question about the role of subsidy in water service delivery. Generally, this is a really important topic. I'm going to actually suggest let's, in the breakout groups, it's something that we address, just because we are starting to run a little short on this one. So thank you very much, Elise. To reinforce, in IDE, this is very much evidence-driven programming with respect to claims, right? Carbon credits are complicated, and it's really important that our claims about mitigation are credible. And IDE, I think, is walking the walk in that regard. Okay. over to Shazadul from water.org, an organization with which some of you may be familiar. Water.org has been a pioneer in microcredit, consumer loans for water and sanitation related purposes. Shazadul is of water.org in Bangladesh. Quite fitting that we be talking about microfinance for WASH in perhaps the birthplace of microfinance with the likes of BRAC and Grameen. Shazadul, if you could walk us through water credit and globally and in Bangladesh in particular.
Sure, thanks, Jeff. Hi, everyone. This is Sajidul. I'm from water.org, Bangladesh. So let me just give you a brief story about what we're discussing here. So we're talking about people needs safe drinking water, safe sanitation. But how do people get access to this safe water and sanitation? Safe water sanitation is not free, at least not free. Those are sustainable. And it's not always affordable for everyone who are earning good, who have money. They can maybe get those safe drinking water and sanitation easily. But there are a certain amount of people who are not able to get those facilities when they need it. So we are at water.org solving this issue of access to finance so that they can get safe water and sanitation globally. We work in 11 countries, and the model we work, we call water credit. So through water credit, we support our implementing partners so that they can introduce water and sanitation financing into their portfolio, and they can provide affordable financing to the people in need, mostly in the low-income poverty people. Through the water credit model, it was an innovation throughout the beginning. People were quite uncertain that how it would work. Would people accept or embrace this new kind of financial model that is not income generating? So, however, the way water.org implemented this project, this worked well. And so far, globally, we have reached more than 58 million people with safe water and sanitation. Through our partners, we were able to disburse more than 12 million loans and mobilizing over $4 billion of capital. So it was great, and look forward to discussing further into this session. Thanks.
Okay, so real quick here, as I recall from our discussions, roughly 1.5 million loans in Bangladesh alone, yes? Which corresponding to about $500 million in lending, roughly 40% of which are for water, the rest for on the sanitation side. So could you tell us how the trends in lending since 2015, when you began, are we looking at a good upward shaped curve? And if you could tell us about specific measures that you've taken with the microfinance institution to unleash lending in that context.
Yes. Let me get back with another set of story that how this has been an experience, a positive experience for water.org, as well as where we operate currently right now. Particularly in Bangladesh, we have so far disbursed more than 1.5 million loans through our partners. The interesting story is when we started water credit with our partners, it was not an easy job. People were not actually easily embracing this new kind of mechanism of financing. So we had to introduce different kind of pilot projects with our partners in different regions. For some partners, it was in different branches, specific branches. Through the pilot project, when we scaled, when we were able to introduce them how to blend, how to sustain a water sanitation portfolio, then they were able to scale into other regions. In terms of piloting, we provided them with capacity building, we provided them with specific product development support, we provided them with project designing support, we supported them in terms of their staff capacity building, ICBCC materials, as well as their in terms of borrower awareness support, so that they can generate the demand into the field, as well as they can continue to raise the supply side as well, so that they can meet the demand. One of the major point is into our overall portfolio, most of the loans are for sanitation, because in Bangladesh, we do have certain access to safe drinking water across the country. However, a large number of people are beyond the access to of safe sanitation. In recent years, the trend has been really great, mostly after the COVID. Even during the COVID, Bangladesh saw a great trend in terms of water and sanitation lending. If I can recall correctly, even during the COVID situation, Water.org Bangladesh was able to reach more than 2 million people only in Bangladesh. And since then, the trend is going upward always. Since more than 40% of Bangladesh lacks safe water and sanitation, that's roughly around 8 crore people. So there's a high demand, and we have just started. We have reached around 8 million people, and we're looking forward to reaching more people in coming years.
Thanks, Shazadul. Just really quickly, I think the scale of this program, again, given that this is lending for a non-income generating assets, is it defies expectation. I think a lot of expectation. More questions. Well, during the breakout groups, I encourage questions to Shazadul about, again, how to get the banks interested, how to de-risk, how to, what kind of work was required with them. We're going to jump along, but thank you, Shazadul. That was great. Okay. All right. So for the last innovation, we're going to explore how to remove the financial obstacles for regulatory authorities, for water service providers to conduct the water quality testing that's already required by national regulations and that are often influenced by WHO guidelines. How to remove these financial obstacles. And to do that, I'm pleased to present Peace Musonge of Akwaya and also this Real Water program to introduce the Water Quality Assurance Fund.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay, we started by standing. Also we'll end by standing. So as I said, my name is Peace Musonge. I'm a program manager with Akwaya Institute. I'm based in Kenya. How does the Water Quality Assurance Fund work? As you can see, we've been talking about safe water, but how do we know water is safe? Safe water to rural water supplies. So that's why we bring in the laboratory. So the Water Quality Assurance Fund looks at de-risking the de-risking on water quality testing. So with that, we have 3 different partners. We have the laboratory, we have the assurance fund, and then we also have the water service providers. So what happens is that the lab commits itself to testing and analyzing, collecting samples and analyzing monthly water samples as per the World Health Organization guidelines and as per the national guidelines of a specific country. So currently the Water Quality Assurance Fund, we're working in Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and Ghana. So the water systems also then commit to paying a monthly fee. However, we know that rural water supply is intermittent, and also water suppliers also have inconsistent income. So in case they cannot pay for that monthly testing fee, the Water Quality Assurance Fund comes in and we shall pay on their behalf. However, the water system will have to pay us back at a certain agreed time. And this is going to be enforced by the government authorities. So we have agreements that the water supplier also has to sign. We have the government authority, and then also we have the Water Quality Assurance Fund as us also signing. So what is currently happening is that we've had we as USAID has said that we're looking at generating evidence. And so this is an implementation research, and we're generating this evidence to show how the Water Quality Assurance Fund can work in water systems. So currently we have 31 systems in Ghana with 2 management models, and that's community managed. And also we have a social enterprise called Safe Water Network. Then in Uganda, we also have, we are currently doing, working with the umbrella and the national utility called National Water, Sewage and Corporation. Yeah, which I think, yeah, you know about, you're nodding. Yes. So then in Kenya, we have 30 systems, 35 systems, and we're working with 3 counties. That's Kericho, Nakuru, and Uasin Gishu County. So I think that's—
Stay there. Okay, so a couple of questions for you.
Yeah.
So on its face, this is a very narrow intervention. It's just removing the risk to a central laboratory to do water quality testing for a service provider.
Yes.
But we have this evidence of this cascade of secondary effects. And that's kind of what really excites us, right? If you could just talk through some of those.
Yes, so currently, based on the evidence that we've collected in the field, we've seen a lot of positivities, and I'll mention a few of them. First, we've seen there's an increase in chlorination because we've showed the evidence to the communities. And as we said, we're demystifying these water quality results. They don't stay with the laboratory and the government officials. We have community engagements where we share the water quality results, and through this evidence, water system operators are now increasing their tariffs, and there's willingness to pay by the consumers because they understand that they need to purchase dosage for chlorination. They need to also need to pay for the water testing. So with that, they see this evidence. And secondly, we've also seen a reduction in E. coli. So that has also made water safer. And then also we've also seen that most of the water system operators have now also gained technical assistance in terms of chlorination because they were doing chlorination without having the proper methodologies. So with this evidence, we've also seen that in terms of policy shifts, and this is something that is something that I think you'd need to applaud for. I think those who are from Uganda would understand National Water and Sewage Corporation. They only test waters, they only test their systems, they only test water from the systems that are only covered by them. However, with the Water Quality Assurance Fund, they've agreed to test this model with other external water systems. So this is something that has created a big policy shift, and it needed a lot of meetings and evidence based. So with that, we went to the field with National Water. They saw the need that these water systems had, that they needed to have their water tested because they were supplying a big population. Yeah.
Thank you, Peace. I think that's good enough. This program is called Real Water, and one of our mottos is keeping it real. And so everything that all the presentations you saw were really grounded. It was really important that they be grounded in evidence. I'll just add to what Peace said. Currently, the Water Quality Assurance Fund is going through randomized trials in Ghana and in Kenya, and further impact evaluations. So in steps, right? We move in steps. First, make sure that the evidence is really strong for scale up. I also just want to recognize, in addition to USAID for funding this program, the Hilton Foundation that's represented here and the Helmsley Foundation. They've made important contributions. We're now, I think, how far behind? Maybe only 5 minutes over, I think. More? Uh-oh. How much over? 10-minute breakout session. You have 10 minutes to pepper these panelists with questions. And we, in terms of how we organize this, I guess, can you just raise your hands as you distribute yourself evenly across the room? And then we'll send people, and then just go to the table where each of these panelists is standing. And we'll go 10 minutes for you to jostle with each other, to ask them to stump them with questions. So please. Thanks. And in terms of guidance, we'll be putting up a slide, but what we encourage you to do is to be asking questions that weren't covered in the panel. Really pepper them on challenges. And yeah, there you go. Hey, thanks again. I'm sorry. I should have done it. You're already there. Chlorination, micro lendings, water quality assurance fund, climate finance, and solar pumping. I'll repeat it again. Sensors. Chlorination to sensors and inline chlorination. Micro lending, solar pumping.
All right, everyone, just as it starts to get interesting, unfortunately, we have to move on to the next panel. But I can promise you that that will be as interesting and as engaging. So if you could please move back to your seats or stay where you are, and I'll ask our next 5 panelists to come up to the stage. Mikhail, we are looking for you. Rabindra? Start. All right, I'm really happy to introduce our next 5 panelists, and we've given them a slightly different assignment. We've asked them to speak about their work somewhat in the context of looking forward, hopefully to get all of us to think a little bit about the vision for our own work, how we're going to be addressing priorities for the future. So I'll start with, I'm going to introduce everybody straight away, and then after the introductions, ask each of you to introduce your topic, your subject, your work for about a minute, and then we'll switch to questions. So I'll be moderating questions, also trying to be a little more able to take questions from the audience for this session. So I'll begin with Michael Dupuis from Uduma, who will be discussing public-private partnerships and the model that they've been developing within their organization, Uduma. Next is Brooke Atwell from the Nature Conservancy, focused on very ambitious programs dedicated to nature-based solutions. And then we have Kelly Trott from Imagine H2O, an organization dedicated to finding and supporting the best of the best in water and sanitation innovation. Next, we have Mr. R.K. Srinivasan, we also call him Srini, from USAID India, who will give us some background on how USAID establishes co-creation to better develop programs with all stakeholders. And then finally, we have Mr. Rabindra Karki from IDE, again, who will be speaking about human-centered design and how they incorporate that process into that work. So with that, I'll begin by asking you, Mikhail, to spend about 1 minute describing the work at Uduma. Good luck.
Thank you. So I'm Michael Dupuis. I'm the Deputy Director of Uduma. And so Uduma is a private operator. It's a kind of utility for rural areas, from very isolated areas to peri-urban areas. We could call it like off-grid water. We provide basic services, water services, but they have to be durable and reliable. And the objective is to get sustainability through profitability. We do all types of infrastructure, from hand pumps to small solar systems to water pipe systems. And we are 100% private. We operate usually under affirmage, but we also do PPP, and we'll develop it further, but always with official contracts with the government. We actually operate in 4 countries: Burkina Faso, Mali, Ivory Coast, and Benin. It's about 1.5 million inhabitants. And to give you an idea about the cost of the service, it's about €2 per year per person. Voilà.
Hi, everyone.
I'm Brooke Atwell from the Nature Conservancy, and we are a global international nonprofit working on environmental issues. I specifically work on the Resilient Watershed Strategy, which is all about mainstreaming nature-based solutions in the water sector and among climate adaptation actors. So I don't actually know how I finagled my way onto this panel, because I don't know if y'all have heard, but nature's kind of old, or so the science says. And so nature-based solutions are really about actions that protect, restore, sustainably manage our ecosystems for the benefit of biodiversity and for people. And so when we talk about nature-based solutions, we're really talking about kind of watershed investment programs that combine the governance with the financing to deploy NBS in watersheds where people operate and people live. And so when it comes to kind of crossover with the wash sector, we're increasingly looking at how nature-based solutions can kind of de-risk some of those investments that y'all are making in villages and communities where you're touching down on the ground. And we work with organizations like the Catholic Relief Services in much of Africa and in Latin America, trying to build out more of these watershed investment programs worldwide.
Hi, everyone. Kelly Trott with Imagine H2O. Imagine H2O is a 501c3 nonprofit water technology accelerator. The next question generally is, what does that mean? I like to say that we're a startup that helps water technology start up. And I think that I can't really call us a startup anymore, because we've worked with 175 portfolio companies who have raised over $1 billion. So we've done quite well on the accelerator side. And when we talk about innovation and forward looking here, Imagine H2O has really been thinking about pilot projects. My former role was as an investor, and I used to look at water as kind of an investment class. And the problem is a lot of venture capitalists say it's not really investable because there's not enough traction. So really at Imagine H2O, we've been focused on how do we support pilot projects that can then unlock capital to scale. And we've been doing that for the last 5 years. We've supported 70 projects. One project is in the room right now, Christine with Ocean Oasis, which is a wave powered desal. So it's really exciting to see this work come to life.
I'm Srinivasan, R.K. Srinivasan, working in USAID India mission, basically looking after the water and sanitation program. So it is a bilateral agreement between the US government and the Indian government to support the sanitation program from 2015 to 2026. So basically today I'll be discussing about the co-design. Co-design is a process whereby we call the stakeholders who are all involved in the project. Suppose if we release an RFP, then many people apply for it. So from this, the selected person, we bring them together. Not only the main contractor, also the sub partners also. Together, we sit together and discuss for 3 to 4 days about what is actually the project description. And then we bring in the sector experts like gender specialist, monitoring evaluation specialist, and then we bring the government counterparts. Because normally what we have seen in the past also, once we started implementing the program, the local government says that you have not, the program which you are doing is not addressing this, this, and this. And also the co-partner says that I have this capacity, but I have not given the opportunity to do it. So we are trying to address all these issues in the beginning itself. So by a 3-day workshop, we discuss all these things with the local government and with all the co-partners, and then we come out with a finalized project description. That's the main objective of the co-design, so that we get a good program to implement. That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, everyone. This is me, Rabindra Karki from ID Nepal. So I'm from Nepal and now near waiting to the India. Today, I'm talking about human-centered design. In ID, we use human-centered design to hear, create, and deliver the product and the services. So in here phase, we hear the people barrier and different perspective at their desirability to the product and the new innovations. Similarly, in the create phase, we develop some innovations and technologies that is fit to address those desirability of the people. And delivery phase, we scale up those innovations to the large communities. So in HCD, we mainly look after the 3 perspectives. One is technically feasibility or not of the technology, and second one is the enabling environment that is support for wider adoption of the those new ways and technologies. And similarly, we also look for the financial viability, that is economic, and also third one is the peoples and social, that is whether the people are adapting those kind of technology or not. So in three perspective, that technical part and the financial part and the final social part, we look for the human-centered designs. Thank you.
Thanks everybody for very concise descriptions of, as you can imagine, very ambitious programs. I'm going to start with a few questions here, and hopefully we'll again have time to bring in some questions from the audience. Now, we've been hearing about everybody's work in very positive lights, and we all know that it's not always that positive. It's not always that easy. So, Brooke, I'm going to ask you to start. What are some of the ongoing issues that you're seeking to overcome as you scale up nature-based solutions, the water fund model, et cetera?
Well, I'll just pick a couple. So as you all know, nature-based solutions, one of the primary kind of things that draw people to it is that there's sort of this plethora of co-benefits as an opportunity when you implement, say, forest protection. You can get biodiversity protection, increase infiltration into aquifers, sediment kind of retention benefits. There's a whole host of things. But because nature-based solutions are implemented in the watershed where people live and generate a lot of benefits that could be of interest to many investors, you got a lot of players kind of active on the court at one time. And that is, I think, a very exciting opportunity. I'm personally jazzed when stakeholders engage and then all agree to do one thing. I mean, the rush is just incredible. But to get there, it takes a lot of time, energy, effort to really bring people along for the journey. And so I would say kind of the slowness that you have to go to get stakeholders on board and investors on board and develop a governance structure that works for everyone. That's probably the primary barrier, I would think, to scaling very quickly.
Mikhail, I'll put you on the spot next. Are there one or few critical lessons that you would share from Uduma's work that might be relevant to others that are trying to develop similar initiatives to collaborate with government through partnerships for rural water services?
I have prepared many, so I'll try to pick on a few of them. Now, first to start, I would like to make a reference with the presentation of Sean. In the past decades, we were mostly focusing on technical innovations to provide water to people. I think for the future decades now, the challenge is innovative models to provide water services, to make sure what we are building is lasting. So by saying so, we believe at Uduma as a private operator, as I said, PPP models are for us the most promising tools to support service deliveries that would provide lasting impact at scale. Well, this is something that you very commonly hear, but this is really true. But to get there, to this objective, key stakeholders, of course, government, local authorities, donors must change and develop enabling environment. Very commonly said, first one is to be the institutional framework, but not only, also the policy implementations, not only writing it, but make sure it's really happening. The best example I have is in Benin, where we are working, where it has been prepared for years, and there was an official contract with very important things for an operator. There is a clear role and responsibilities, clear perimeters, where it includes economy of scale, consolidation, cross-subsidy because they are profitable sites and unprofitable ones, consistent tax policy with VAT issues that has to be exempted on either on both sides or not at all, because in between it is only expenses for the operators. And finally, predictable tariff adjustment. I heard the volatility of oil prices. When you work with generators, you have to impact this on the price of water, but this is not happening. So these are things as a private operator that you have to deal with. The second one is aligning donor objectives to the means. We have heard so many times the willingness to implement things with the private sector, especially there is an understanding that the public sector by itself, especially with the limited absorption capacity of the countries, that the public cannot alone achieve SDGs. So how to have the private sector, and then they don't have the tools to do it. And the final point is about unlocking entrepreneurial forces and initiative by de-risking investment. I take the example of the energy contract. They have a contract for price, duration, and volume. In water, we can deal with the price, we can calculate it, the duration, we can have a deal with it, but then with the volume, there is a lot of uncertainties. So please develop things around it. If you want to speak about it later on, I'm very happy to go deeper. Thank you.
On that point, the Real Water podcast program has featured both Uduma, Mikhail's work, and Brooke in the Nature Conservancy. There's a lot of detail in the podcast. Don't worry, the rest of you are on our schedule, so you will be contacted. Maybe Rabindra, if I could go to you next, please. Again, I will ask if you can keep your responses short, but just a quick discussion. You've talked about human-centered design, but I'm very curious on how different stakeholders, how do you bring the beneficiaries, government, and the implementers like IDE together in your process?
Yeah, in SCD process, we start with a here phase. So in here phase, we talk about the people who really facing the problems, who having the issues, and also talking with different stakeholders related to those issues and the issues that the people are facing. So we talk about the stakeholders, government, peoples, private sectors. So from there, we can uncover the different problems. Like maybe there could be some barriers related to financing. So similarly, and also developing some technology that could solve the problems. So, and then we go for the here phase, in design phase. So based on the learning or the insights we receive from the here phase, we could go for the design. So designing the technology or services that solve the problems may not be, in the first time. So we go for the multiple rounds iteration phase. So from that, we may reach to the final product or final innovations. And then after that, after testing multiple times, and we go for the delivery phase, scaling of the product and services.
Yeah, I think it's just the iterative process, the iterative nature of innovation development may be obvious to many of us, but so important to always be reminded of. And so thank you, Rabindra. Srini, hold on to that, because I want to ask now, just building on that question, you work with USAID India, and we've heard from the earlier panel that the Jal Jeevan mission in India is maybe one of the most ambitious rural water development programs globally. And we've heard about the demand for chlorination within the Jal Jeevan mission from Evidence Action. Are there other innovative other areas of innovation that the Indian government is currently looking at with respect to rural water?
Yeah. So the Jal Jeevan mission is an ambitious program which targets to provide drinking water to people by 2024. So as you know, in India, traditionally the water supply was hand pumps only, where women have to go 2 kilometers to fetch the water. Now they are shifting to the community based water supply. So here I would refer to one of the activities, Women and Water Alliance, which USAID implemented in partner with water.org also. There actually, though in the water supply, though the local households cannot afford to buy a filter. So there water.org helped them, the SHG groups, to mobilize funds to purchase the filter. So almost they mobilized almost 2 million US dollars worth of loan to the household level through SHG groups, and linking the SHG groups with the local banks, they're able to buy the filter. And coming to the priority, as one is the water quality is the main priority, like online chlorination. And another priority which the government of India is also online monitoring of the water supply and on quality as well as the quantity through IoT based systems, to mobile based apps. They have piloted in 2-3 states of India, where how the water quality and quantity can be mobilized to a centralized online systems. So that is a major priority of government, to provide a household level water in premise, they call it in premise water supply with adequate quantity of 70 LPCD and with adequate quality. That's a major priority. Thank you.
I imagine that sensors and data management is going to become an increasingly dominant theme in our discussions. Finally, Kelly, great success with Imagine H2O. I've seen a lot of the progress. I find it very impressive. And you have one of the investees, I guess, here. Can you give us, are there good examples of innovations that you've identified, that you've helped to support, that are directly applicable to some of the lower income settings where many of us are focused?
Absolutely. I think that, I mean, we have our urban water challenge, which probably isn't as focused on our rural, but we also have a rural program. And one that I think many people don't think of is the Central Valley in California. So one of our companies, this is actually interesting in terms of pivoting your technology, right? You come up with a great technology, but then how do you actually apply it to maybe lower income areas? So 120 Water is a lead testing technology, and they've really used a business model approach to how do you solve innovation? How do you solve operations within that testing? And what they've done in the Central Valley is there's a lot of contamination going on in the water there, and over 1 million people don't access safe drinking water in the Central Valley. And what they've done is they've used their operational approach to test for those emerging contaminants, so we can actually know what is going on within the water within the Central Valley, so that we're able to solve it. So that's one example in the United States. But one in Panama that we're working with is Change Water Labs. And they basically work beyond the pipe in terms of sanitation and toilets. And they're providing a toilet that, where it actually evaporates the waste. And so we want to use technology like this with the understanding that a lot of it is going to be not just the technology, but the buy-in in terms of the communities as well.
There you have it. Lots to look forward to. I'm sorry that we are out of time for this session, but it's one of the advantages of being early in World Water Week is that you have plenty of time to find our panelists for more in-depth discussions. Thanks everybody for your participation. We look forward to engaging with you, of course, through the rest of the week. Yes. And of course, we have Karen Setti from Acquia, who's been running the online component of this episode in parallel. So thanks a lot, Karen.